Hey, what you reading for?
An intelligent virus overruns the world. A damaged man uses the foster care program to start a murderous cult. And an ex-con is hired to protect a millionaire from a dark emissary sent to collect the devil's due. This is 1985, the year in horror. Hello and welcome to part 6 of my 10-part video retrospective of horror from the 1980s, where I go year to year, pick out 3 titles, read them with fresh eyes, and report back to you with my honest opinions. Was 1985 a good year for horror? Well, I have successfully repressed most of my childhood memories, so it would be dishonest of me to pretend I know the answer. But I am curious. And speaking of being dishonest, just like the last relationship I was in, I decided to dive in and experience the horror for myself. I read 3 books that were put out in 1985, and I have opinions. If you're new to this channel, thank you for stopping by. Do hit that subscribe button while you're here. The channel needs to grow, and you have the power to help make that happen, and I do appreciate the support.
10 more
subscribers. As always in these 1980s video retrospectives, we'll begin by taking a look at some cool cover art of horror books that came out in 1985, featuring the music of Alfred Schnittke. Enjoy the short montage, and I'll see you on the other side for a look at a unique year of horror. 1985, Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA was the #1 album. Careless Whisper by Wham! Was the #1 song. And Back to the Future was the #1 movie. In horror movies, 1985 saw the release of Fright Night, Reanimator, and one of my all-time favorites, Return of the Living Dead. But what about horror books? Well, coming off the mega success of his short story collections, The Books of Blood, in 1985, Clive Barker would give us his first horror novel, The Damnation Game. I read it, and it is excellent. Joseph Whitehead made a deal with the devil, but when a dark emissary is sent to collect, Joseph hires an ex-con as his personal bodyguard to rob the devil of his due. Locked in a terror-shrouded fortress of his own design, Joseph Whitehead has hell to pay, and no soul is safe from the ravaging fear, the resurrected fury, the unspeakable desire of the Damnation Game. The Damnation Game has one of the best openings in all of horror, I think. Set in Warsaw, Poland, immediately at the end of World War II. The city is a shambles. The soldiers who are gathered there, who have abruptly been cut off from their adrenaline supply that the war provided, they attempt to get their fix by engaging in games of chance. The more morbid, the better. We have this Joseph Whitehead character who hears tell of a gambler who never loses, never. Now, you would think that an adversary who never loses would be someone a gambling addict would avoid. But in the world that Clive Barker posits, that gambling addict seeks not the thrill of the bet, but the gambling addict seeks his own self-destruction. So an adversary who never loses, that is like pure, uncut heroin for the gambling addict. So when Joseph Whitehead He seeks out this infamous gambler. The scene plays out like he's entering a crack house with gambling addicts strewn about the corridors, and the descriptions are gorgeous. Whether it's from the ravages of war they've experienced, but all these gambling addicts are scarred and disfigured and grotesquely deformed and emaciated. And the whole atmosphere is one of desperation and need, and it is beautiful. After this opening, we cut to present-day London, and we focus on a character named Marty, who is also a gambling addict, but Marty is in prison for armed robbery. So Joseph Whitehead, who is one of the richest, most powerful men in the world, he has Marty released so he can serve as his bodyguard and protect him from this supernatural villain named Mamulian, and keep him from enforcing the pact that they made back in Warsaw. After showing the world that he is the master of the horror short story with his collections, The Books of Blood, with the Damnation game, Clive Barker proves that he excels equally in the long-form novel as well. And while he would go on to create some of the best or the best horror fantasy hybrids, such as Weaveworld or Imajica, and while there are some fantasy elements in the Damnation game, it remains probably his most firmly horror novel of his catalog. It's a sweeping narrative covering many years and many locations, and it's action-packed. So if you've never read Clive Barker, but you like your horror with lots of action, I would give the Damnation game a high recommendation. If you have read the Damnation game, but you are looking for your next Clive Barker experience, one of the first videos I put out on this channel was a ranking of all 13 of Clive Barker's novels. So I'll encourage you to check out that video, and maybe from there you'll get some information that will help you select your next Clive Barker read.
Do you ever fantasize about being killed?
In the second installment of this 1980s horror retrospective, I read an author who was new to me. I read Brainchild by Andrew Neiderman, and I really liked it. So since then, I have been eager to have my second Andrew Neiderman experience, and the opportunity presents itself here in 1985. So I read Child's Play. Now, at first, I thought this was very funny. It is told from the perspective of the wife, and her husband is a terrible person. But she doesn't seem to notice, or she's always making excuses for him, or she'll say things offhandedly, just random things, give us random details about her husband that are huge red flags. For example, she'll say, oh, always after dinner he likes to retire to his study and stay there for hours, and he always listens to Carmina Burana. Which, if you have a flatmate, let alone a husband who spends every evening alone in a room listening to Carmina Burana, you need to get out of that place, right? Carmina Burana is that famous classical piece with the chorus of ominous chanting in Latin, Semper crescis, ut decrescis, vita detestabilis, nunc obdurat, et truncurat, lumbo mentis aciem. Right, like music for psychopaths, right? And she, and this woman, this wife, she's constantly, like, page after page, she'll just drop hints about how peculiar he is, and she'll always make excuses for him. And I thought it was really funny. I was like, oh, how naive can this person be? This is hilarious. But problem is that early on, her husband just treats her terribly, and he's cruel to her and mean. And so early on, it just stopped being funny. And I'm like, you need to get out of there. You get out of this relationship. Go live with your mother or leave him. But she wouldn't. She would just make excuses for him or blame herself. And then, so this couple, they live on a big estate on a lake. And he's impotent, right? Like he like will not touch his wife. Ugh. So one day, out of the blue, he says, we should have children. And she's like, what about your problem, right? And you never touch me. How are we gonna have children? And he responds with like, oh, don't be stupid. I'm not talking about anything gross like that. I mean, why don't we take in a foster child, right? So they take in a foster child, and then a second, and then a third. And this guy, he's just taking in these damaged teenagers so he can start a cult with him as the cult leader, right? It sounds dark, it sounds grim. It is dark and grim. But Andrew Neiderman is a comfortably camp storyteller. He has no problem putting in a healthy layer of cheese on his stories. So it helps the darkness go down. I will admit, of the two Andrew Neiderman experiences I had, Brainchild and now Child's Play, I like them both. I do have a preference, a strong preference actually, for Brainchild. The husband, he's such a terrible person. Is so cruel to his wife. It just took some of the fun out of it. And I spent a good portion of the book reading it angry, After two experiences with Andrew Neiderman, am I going to have a third? Yeah, definitely. This is an author I really like. I like the way I like his storytelling style. His books are 300 pages thereabouts. They're expertly paced, tight, fun, and camp. He reminds me a lot of Ira Levin, but without the sci-fi or supernatural elements, preferring instead to focus on psychological horror. And I love me some Ira Levin. And after two experiences, I'm starting to love me some Andrew Neiderman too. He has written 46 books, and he's still writing, right? 46, that's not counting all the books he wrote as a ghostwriter under the name V.C. Andrews. So there's quite a lot to choose from. If you are familiar with this author's work and you have a recommendation as to what my third Andrew Neiderman experience could be, please let me know, because I am eager to have my third Andrew Neiderman experience. And if you've never read his work, I would encourage you to check him out, especially if you enjoyed the work of Ira Levin. I think it's a good comparison. Child's Play is good. I do think Brainchild is better, though.
Do you ever wonder about all the different ways of dying? Violently?
Now, Clive Barker, I was familiar with. Andrew Neiderman, I was familiar with. But the real joy in doing this 80s retrospective is discovering authors I was not familiar with. So I read Blood Music by Greg Bear. Blood Music is a sci-fi horror hybrid about an intelligent, fast mutating virus that communicates with its hosts and invites them to join them as they overrun and transform the world into a new unimaginable biology. The first half of this 350-page book is a pretty straightforward body horror tale. And in the second half, we veer towards a hard, fantastical science fiction. I think the combination of the two, and so strongly delineated, I think it made for an enjoyable, compelling overall reading experience. On the one hand, the world does undergo a radical transformation, but Greg Bear doesn't exactly have the description muscles or world building chops that Clive Barker has, but honestly, no author has description chops and world building chops like Clive Barker does. So the descriptions in Blood Music did leave me a bit wanting, but the concept of this reckless man who is obsessed with the virus he's created, and the other characters we get to know who are each unique and compelling in their own way, that was the strength of the story of the book for me. Blood Music gets its title from the characters who describe what it's like to communicate with the virus inside them. They say it is like harmonizing with their blood, a sort of blood music, which is cool. Originally published as a short story 2 years prior, Blood Music was a hit for Greg Bear, and it would explore a theme that he would revisit several times later in his career, the theme of reality as a function of observation. Blood Music also features the very first instance of nanotechnology in science fiction, according to Wikipedia, citation pending. While I did enjoy Blood Music, since it was my first Greg Bear experience, it begs the question, will I be reading more from this author? Well, he does have some intriguing titles. The Infinity Concerto comes to mind. I don't know what that's about, but I am intrigued by the title. However, I am not much of a sci-fi reader, and until that changes, I don't think I'm going to be revisiting Greg Bear. I'm glad, though, that thanks to this retrospective, I'm glad I took the opportunity to discover him. I thought Blood Music was well written, it was compelling, it was fun. But I think I'm good. I think I can move on. Should you read Blood Music? Well, if you are a fan of sci-fi horror hybrids, I think that Greg Bear is one of the more popular writers in this genre. I think I got that impression from the research I did. And Blood Music certainly is a good example of that genre, sci-fi horror hybrid. So yeah, read Blood Music. It's 350 pages, but it's a fast read, and I think a good one.
I wonder, what would be the most horrible way to die?
Try not to think about dying too much.
Well, for me, the worst way would be for a bunch of old men to get around me and start biting and eating me alive.
I see.
Do you have any experience with the books or authors I talked about in this video? Do you have any recommendations for me for the 1987, 88, or 89 installments? I've already read for 1986. I will be putting that video out shortly. What do you remember about 1985? Besides Linnea Quigley's Graveyard Striptease from Return of the Living Dead, obviously. And do you think I should continue with this trend of randomly singing in my videos, which I've noticed seems to have come up quite a few times recently? Sure to send me to the top of the booktube charts, right? I always love reading your comments. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in 1986.